So there are some aspects of the Ten Commandments I want to focus on. And in particular, we have the first commandment where it says, "You shall not have other gods besides me." So when I read Mircea Eliade for the first time, he covered this commandment. And he says something very interesting that I want to talk a little bit about. He says that what is involved in this commandment, "You shall not have other gods beside me," shows that in this moment, there is not a strict monotheism, or monotheism in a strict sense, I should say. The existence of other gods is not denied in this commandment. Rather, it's to highlight God's supremacy or God's priority over these other so-called gods. And you see this throughout the Old Testament, especially in the Psalms, but you also get it a little bit in Exodus after the crossing of the Red Sea. There's the hymn of victory, the hymn of Moses, where he says, "Who among the gods is like you, O Lord?" So what's being highlighted here is an absolute fidelity to this one God, because as God says later in the Ten Commandments, he is a jealous God. So there's the struggle between false gods and the true God. So by acknowledging other gods, divinities, or divine beings, or supernatural beings, we would, in a more technical sense, call them angels, particularly fallen angels or principalities. But sole allegiance is still with the Lord. That is the heart of this covenant. But I think it's very interesting, this idea that God in this moment is kind of acknowledging other gods with a small g. Again, we would call them more properly fallen angels, because their God kind of implies a more powerful being, something kind of coexistent with the one God. But here, I think keeping in mind the idea of principalities and fallen angels is very helpful, because there are other supernatural beings that truly kind of grapple for our attention. Particularly, we think of fallen angels, things that try to get us distracted or pull us away from the worship of the one true God. I think that this take here, that there isn't a strict monotheism, just in the sense that there's a hierarchy of celestial beings. That's true. And those other beings kind of interact with us and can distract us from the worship of the one true God. That's not to say, I think the fundamental commandment here to worship God still remains, of course, and that these other divine beings don't deserve our worship and attention. Nonetheless, there is still this hierarchy that exists that we should acknowledge and realize that kind of surrounds us and distracts us.